Hey, I am reading a book today that you might not have heard of. I don't know how obscure it really is. It feels very relevant, but perhaps only in that sphere of the internet that I mostly live, which is Tumblr. Now, this is Apparently Sir Cameron Needs to Die by Greer Stothers. And this is a book that came out, pretty recently, but like a few months ago, I'm pretty sure at this point, that is by somebody who is there really isn't like big name people on Tumblr, but it's somebody who is slightly more known than others, I would say, by virtue of having some very interesting cats in their house, some very intriguing cats. So a lot of people have seen pictures of this author's cats, and that is how I know them and how a lot of people do. But they recently came out with their first book, and they have like another book coming out, I think like next year. And when I first heard about let me tell you why I'm choosing to do this and why it's been kind of an interesting hot topic on Tumblr for a little bit. When I first heard about this book, I did not think anything of it, and it didn't sound like it was going to be that appealing to me. I was mildly curious. It is a fantasy comedy kind of book that is also a gay romance, and I wasn't necessarily going to pick that up, but all I saw about it was positive stuff. I started following the author like this year, and I can't even remember their username off the top of my head. Like, I don't know them or have any strong opinions towards them in any way. They just seem like a person. Like most people, all people, actually. Like all people they are a person. And I saw them like reblog people being positive about the book when it came out, some fan art, that kind of thing. And that was all I really saw about it until I saw somebody on my dash vague posting about something. And they were vague posting about like some sort of indie book that it was like, how is anybody surprised that an indie book by like a white author is problematic or something like that. Like, it was just kind of a vague posting, lol, who can be surprised, a bit of vindictive energy, like whatever. But it did, of course, make me curious, because I'm like, ooh, what's this? You know, I don't really like to get involved in book drama, but I won't deny that I am interested to hear what's going on and form my own opinions about it. So I found out that it was about Sir Cameron, and I was like, okay. So I went looking around a bit, and basically, the very rough gist, and I'm not really going to pull up specifics, I don't want to get the specifics, frankly. There was a very long review that was posted that was very in-depth and seemed very like thoughtful and considerate and stuff, but it did point out a couple things in the book that might be something. See, off the top of my head, I can't even remember it now. I did skim read that review, but I didn't read all of it because I didn't want to fully spoil myself. I know like one big thing that happens towards the end of the book. I know like one kind of reveal and a little bit about some of it, but otherwise I'm really not spoiled for the book. I was kind of avoiding it. I believe that the main allegations are around like depiction of people of color, some like stereotyping, maybe some fat phobia, and I think maybe even some transphobia, but these are again like things that people have said about it. And then what I saw a lot more was a lot of people really enthusiastic to dunk on a book for coming out as having issues, basically. Like, not people who had read the book or knew much about it. And I don't think that the review, again, I really am just talking right now because I don't want to, I want to go into this as fresh as possible, so I chose to not, hunt down the specific details when I started reading it. People who just seem really enthused to see a debut author on Tumblr fail, and I'm putting quotes on fail because I don't think the book has been a failure. I think a lot of people have liked it. I think that, I'm gonna tell you what I think about these problematic elements, but I'm sort of putting quotes around that because I don't know actually how strong it legitimately is versus people really wanting to look at something that is at all, it's not even popular on Tumblr, but a Tumblr thing, an energy to it and finding ways to deem it as like a dumpster fire rather than just not perfect or a bit awkward, or maybe there are some mistakes, but it's the first time the author's doing a book. Like, I'm a lot more forgiving for like a debut like queer author who's not very big and doesn't have like a big social media presence. They just have some cats that we look at on Tumblr. I think people can be very harsh about these things, especially in the like, this book isn't indie, but you know, like smaller publishing world. And the first thing I actually saw was I saw people sending the author like hateful asks, and the author really kind of freaking out because the energy had turned on them and they were apologizing a lot and like just seemed to be having a little bit of a meltdown kind of thing. And I felt very bad for them because, again, I don't know how the book actually is going to be in terms of this content, but my general impression going in is that this seems very overblown and the energy seems very like vindictive for no real reason, just because I've seen it so many times. I've been on Tumblr for like nearly 15 years. Like, I've been around, okay? So, as you can see when I hold this book up, I have actually started reading it. I filmed this intro once and I went on way too long, so I'm kind of going over it again. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it from what I have started reading it. I'm also going to tell you what the book is about. I'll read you like the back blurb. Okay. Let's read the back blurb. All his life, Sir Cameron has stayed as far away from danger as possible. He is, quite frankly, too handsome to die a violent and pointless death in battle. But when a church prophecy predicts that killing him is the only way to defeat the mad sorcerer Marullo, Cameron throws himself on the mercy of the one person who actually wants him to survive. Marullo isn't thrilled to be babysitting a spoiled, attention-seeking knight, but fate has tied them together. Cameron, meanwhile, is on a voyage of self-discovery. It turns out he's really, really into surly sorcerers who lock him up and tell him what to do. Who knew? Cameron is quite invested in not dying, but soon he's also invested in Marullo. And sometimes supporting the sorcerer you care about means taking an interest in their hobbies, even if that hobby is trying to kill God. Even if it might get you killed, too. So, as you can see, this is kind of a absurd fantasy, adventure romance romp kind of thing. And it is a humor book. This is the one thing going in that I knew was actually going to be the most challenging for me. I like comedy. I don't know if that's a weird thing to say, but I do really like comedy. I like comedians. I like stand-up. I like a lot of things with comedians. I like panel shows. I like, comedy movies and TV shows and even books. So I do like these things, but in books, comedy is one of the hardest things to pull off, I find, because humor can be very based on the person, but humor also is often very based in like the delivery of it. And a lot of delivery can be done with visuals or, the speaking, that in a book, you're not in control of that. So it's a lot harder to kind of set up your audience in the right way. And this is also, as a fantasy kind of absurd humor book, it does set itself up in my mind to compare it to others of that kind, which means that I think of Discworld. And Discworld is a really unfair thing to compare this book to. Like, this book is not trying to be Discworld. It's not like Discworld. But when I think of a book that is doing a comedy version of a absurd fantasy society, I think of Discworld, because that is like kind of such an archetype and masterclass, and Pratchett is such a good writer. He's so good at his plotting and characters, and like all of his prose is so tight and just comes together in this amazing way. So it's a very unfair comparison, but it does immediately come to mind when I think of this. And so I have been nervous about that one aspect, and I'm about 30 pages in, and I'm going to talk to you about some things that do stand out immediately. I think it's way too soon to judge the book as a whole. Obviously, it's kind of too soon to judge a lot of things about the book, but I can talk a little bit about some things with the writing and things that I think going forward are going to be real issues for me, and it has nothing to do with what I've heard on Tumblr. So, the comedy in this book is present, and in theory, I like a lot of the tropes and gags it's working with. I like the concepts of the comedy scenes, but I think that this is really lacking commitment to the bit. And in general, the book really feels like it needs a new editor, more editing, I guess. This is one of the times where a lot of the times I'm reading bad prose, I'm not editing it in my head, but in this book, I keep finding sentences and like scenes where I'm thinking to myself, that wording is awkward, that word there is incorrect or unnecessary, this needs to be adjusted. Like, it's not something that usually happens when I'm reading a book, but this book is like right on the verge of prose that I can see ways so clearly to improve, and things that just need a little tweaking that I'm like distracted by wanting to edit it. Also, I should note, this is a proof. So this is an advanced reading copy. I bought this at a secondhand, like, charity shop. You're not supposed to resell these, but it isn't really that rare that ARCs end up there. That means that this is not the final version. That makes it a little bit dubious for, like, quoting things from it. I am gonna read you some quotes. You have to take them with a grain of salt, except I will also compare some to the final version. I am going to read to you a scene that I went and I double-checked in the ebook is exactly the same. So, generally speaking, when something is in the ARC stage, there might still be edits left, which is why you're not really meant to quote them, or you can quote them, but you have to disclose this is not the final version. But also, when something is at the ARC stage, there generally is not going to be any more major edits. The things left are typically going to be typos and smaller things. It's quite rare that at this stage there would be significant changes or even significant, like, sentence changes. But, you know, just in case. So I'm noting that. So, let's see. This book starts with a prologue, and the prologue, the best part about the prologue is that it starts with this each chapter has like a in which so-and-so happens. This is not the first time I encountered this as a comedy choice. I think that it can be a bit hit or miss. Generally speaking, I've enjoyed them so far in the book, but they really can be hit and miss, and it also can be something that is going to wear thin. And it also is bad if it kind of sounds a lot funnier than what the contents of the chapter are. So, prologue. In which the mad sorcerer Marullo announces his nefarious intentions to the world, expecting some non-specific mixture of fear and awe, but is instead ridiculed for his clothing, which he chose on the basis of wanting to look intimidating, and is thus rather sensitive about. I think that that's a funny little intro, but then the actual prologue is just not. It has this, like, it has the setup and the intention of a comedy scene. We have Marullo waiting in line to go speak to a chancellor. He's at some sort of fantasy kingdom, you know, wait in line peasants, and you can go and speak your grievances and be given advice or aid or whatever. And he's waiting in line to go and make his announcement that he is planning on killing God. And the scene is drawn out a bit, and I just really want it to be funnier or more effective than it is. That little paragraph is, he's instead ridiculed for his clothing, and that is kind of a funny bit you could do. But instead, we're from the perspective of the Chancellor. He is noticing the clothing, and starts thinking about it immediately. And he is trying to find it right here. He's wearing black, and I'm actually looking, and I'm like, where is that? He stares at the guy's clothing. He finds him there. Oh, here we go. It's on the first page. His clothing is just awful, he thought, straightening his own ermine-lined sleeves. Though what's worse, to be awful or to be dull? So this man takes note of Marullo's clothing, and then basically, when Marullo first introduced himself, he says, "I am the sorcerer's and then he's cut off by the Chancellor, who says, "Hold on, Elder Beth, do you have any thoughts on his robe? And Elder Beth, this woman next to him from the church, the shade is unpleasant. What does black symbolize? Death or wickedness? And that cut, does he pretend to be a monk? And I think that this is, again, a joke that I see the execution of, but that it is interrupting Marullo before he's spoken, that we're kind of, it's happening too soon and too directly. It should be something where Marullo acts very, forward and overly dramatic, and then finds himself frustrated that the two elders are distracted by discussing his clothing. And ideally, I'd like it if they were discussing his clothing in more detail. I think the comedy frustration is that Marullo is an intimidating dark sorcerer of great power who wants to go and tell the world that he's here to kill God, and the people he's trying to tell about this are really distracted and fixated on the small details that at first they completely miss all of the actual scary details. That's what feels like the scene should be, but it just isn't that. They kind of jump right into just kind of being like, his clothes are a bit weird, huh? Interrupting him before he's done anything. So the Marullo then just starts fighting them and then leaves, basically. And then we jump and it's 40 years in the future. So Marullo's announced his plans, nothing successful, and we go to Sir Cameron, our main character. And Sir Cameron's perspective is in first person, which I think is a mistake. So Sir Cameron in first person, Sir Cameron is he's a tall and handsome and charming and beautiful knight, but he's also a complete coward and an idiot and like a buffoon. He's not very self-aware. And I think that if you're making such a strong character choice, which, that's what Sir Cameron definitely is, he's a very strong character choice. He's an archetype that is very easy to recognize. He's a bit of like a himbo knight. No, himbos have to be nice, and he's not even that nice. I think that if you're doing it in first person, you have to commit very hard to that first person perspective of this buffoon who's full of vanity and is actually like a coward, but kind of presents himself like, yes, I am actually a wonderful, bold, beautiful knight, but he really is just trying to avoid everything. And in third person, I think you'd be a lot more able to comment on him and draw attention to things that he doesn't realize about the people and world because he's in his own head too much. But in first person, we're in his head, and we're not actually, I would say, in his head too much. He is, annoyingly, a little too self-aware. This is a man who is kind of unpleasant overall, but, we're meant to be like, well, he's unpleasant in that he's just kind of a fool. And I have no issues with that character, but I need him to be that. So I'm going to read a little bit of text here that is a scene where, so what happens is that his friend Glenda is an elf. Elves have like blue skin and white hair. His friend Glenda comes to pick him up from the like night place. I don't know, it's probably a castle where they've been fighting the evil sorcerer, and she's like, we have to get out of here right now. And she's been very bothered by something, and eventually she tells him that there's been a prophecy that he's going to die, but him dying will be part of what gets the mad sorcerer to die, so this all has to happen. And this is where they are currently leaving the castle, and he's trying to think about, like, he doesn't know what's going on. So Glenda had barely spoken 2 words, though when I'd walked out in a padded gambeson, secured with buttons of polished unicorn horn, she'd shaken her head, violently, and told me to change into something lighter. Had I pissed her off? I always tried not to, elves being a class above even petty nobility such as myself. I peered at her as we marched beneath the bristling trees in the fading remains of daylight. She didn't seem angry. She looked sad. Loose hairs stuck out from her normally meticulous braid, and she chewed fretfully on her lip. Feeling my gaze, her eyes flicked up to meet mine. I reeled back, pretending to study the flight of a bird overhead. I did consider, briefly, that her mood might have nothing to do with me, that she might have a life of her own, independent of my existence. Only briefly, though. So, this really stands out to me as what I mean by the character needing more commitment to being what he is. Like, that, if I read that and I didn't tell you that he is this super self-conceited buffoon knight, you wouldn't think that from this. Like, he walks out in a padded gambeson, and it's in parentheses, secured with buttons of polished unicorn horn. I don't know what that's doing there. My thought is that that's meant to show that he is caring about fashion, that this is a, very fancy one, the polished horn. I think it's meant to be about his vanity. And when I see that, I want more of that. I want him to tell me a lot about how this thing is constructed. Make it clear that this, to him, is a very important detail, that this is really wild that she isn't, impressed by it. But instead, it's just kind of a little bit there. And then we have him thinking, oh, had I pissed her off? She didn't seem angry. She seemed sad? I don't really know. There's kind of this meandering thought process that isn't giving me anything, but it is making him seem quite self-aware of her feelings. The concept that she might have different feelings. He is still thinking, is she angry at me or sad at me or what? But then that kind of completely deflates the joke, which is that last paragraph. Her mood might have nothing to do with me, that she might have a life of her own, independent of my existence. That only works as a joke if the lead-in to it is him absolutely not thinking about her in any way that doesn't relate to him. So that only is as a punchline, has to be a contrast where he's oh, I did briefly think that maybe she has an existence outside of me, but that's ridiculous. But instead it's just kind of a little half-hearted. And I have so many sticky notes for having read 30 pages, but again, this is a book where I'm really feeling this. It feels very much like someone's first novel, and that's not a bad thing. That's what happens for a first novel. But I just keep seeing these things where I'm ooh, I have specific thoughts about this in a very clear way that I just want to talk about, okay? And I'm going to tell you about another joke execution that doesn't work for me, but I hope that you can see what I mean by it, okay? And it also means I get to read you from the book, and this is something that I did double check is the same. So this is when Glenda is telling Sir Cameron about the prophecy. So this is a bit of a longer one, and really stood out to me, okay? Sticky notes. So, the elders, she said, deftly avoiding a root, burned the last dragon heart to fuel a powerful magic. In the prophetic vision that resulted, they saw the mad sorcerer defeated and the world saved. Hey, that's fantastic, I said, and succeeded in swallowing. Now what the fuck does that have to do with me? She nodded, confirming that yes, it was fantastic. I wondered if I should stand too, or if she might perceive that negatively. For a human woman, a man towering over you during a tense discussion might prove intimidating, but for an elf with their superior strength and magic, I wasn't sure, so I stayed seated, twisting my torso to follow her movements. And they saw the death of a tall, golden-haired knight. She stopped with a pursed, lemon-sucking mouth. They saw you. Ah, I managed. But how certain can they be? It can't be completely conclusive, can it? Is it? She nodded gravely. It is. You die in this prophecy with a sword through your throat. No, I said. It came out like a belch, unbidden. At the look on Glenda's face, I quickly amended it to, no way! How incredible that! What I mean is that's such a fantastic amount of detail. Oh yes, the prophetic vision was clear in every particular. The method of your death, the meadow it happens in, even down to the length of your eyelashes. You do have such long eyelashes for a boy. So, this is something, the punchline here, and I'm talking a lot in punchlines like that's directly it, but I do think that even when you're writing a narrative story and you're telling jokes in a lot more of a, you're not actually writing a bit, but you clearly have a scene or a purpose to the conversation. Him learning about this prophecy, his reaction to it, Glenda's discussion of it. That itself is the setup, and even if it isn't the same as a comedy bit, I think that you need to follow through, and if you're going to make a joke, which there clearly are jokes here, you have to still abide by certain ideas of comedy ruling. So when Glenda says, you know, they saw you, and what I feel like should be happening is Cameron says, oh, you know, how certain can they be? He does say that. She says, yeah, it is you. And then Sir Cameron's reaction is like, how incredible, that's so much detail. But the only detail at that point is that it's you die in this prophecy of a sword through the throat. After that, Glenda says a bunch of highly specific details, such as the meadow it happens in, even down to the length of your eyelashes. That so clearly to me belongs before Cameron talks about how much detail there is. It feels like he should be like, are they sure? And then she goes, oh yes, no, they saw, you know, and then go on like perhaps an even longer, highly specific thing of like, oh, the prophecy said this, and this, and it goes on to describe him in exacting detail, so there's absolutely no question. And that would really leave Sir Cameron a bit speechless, and then he has to catch himself. Oh, wow, no way, that's incredible. Like that kind of catch. It stands out to me so much because it just feels so wrong that it's in that order. Speaking of, there's that very weird aside in the middle here where Cameron is thinking, should I stand up or would that be bad because I'm super tall? And if she was a human woman, then that could be really negative for a man to be way taller and intimidating. And I'm just reading that like, whoa, when did you get so self-aware? Like, I guess considering the other thing I read that doesn't seem out of it, but considering everything else about him, I just find it very strange to have this sudden injection of Cameron thinking about the like visual logistics of being a man and gender dynamics and that kind of thing, when he just doesn't seem to be, in many other cases, aware or thoughtful of that at all. Like, what he does shortly after this is he decides that he's going to try and get away from Glenda, seduce her, and that just doesn't work in the slightest because he has no tact or awareness or ability to really appeal to women. I mean, he is gay. It isn't like, I mean, it's very explicit that it's gay, but he's like, the church in this world is homophobic. So he is like a bit repressed, but he has had sexual encounters with men before and kind of is holding, you know, it's referenced a little bit, but it's clear that that's what's going on. So I just find that inclusion feels, I don't know why he's thinking that. I don't think it fits his character, and it just feels awkward, especially when it's put in a scene that, again, is about to go into a bit of the both plot reveal of what this prophecy is, and also the joke about, like, no, it's 100% you, and Cameron freaking out about it. It doesn't work for me. So at this point, we learn about Cameron having, like, a little bit of the world history. So what we know is that there's humans and elves. I think those are the only species. And they live in this just fantasy world. Magic exists. Elves are the superior species in like every way. They have dark vision. They, superior senses, strength, all of that, magic. Humans exist. And God is real. It's more real than, I can't say more real than in real life. I think more tangible. So we learn a bit of history, and I really like this concept of the backstory. I really think that this is such a cool concept and idea, and it's the descent. So basically, in the past, the ancients, with their heretical devices, pumped poisons into the air and water, and instead of seeking a solution, they simply retreated indoors, leaving the outside world to rot and die. You might imagine that watching all this, God would grow rather fed up. And so he did. One day, he snapped, or rather, he descended. Like a parent storming into a child's room with a brush, he purified the world, blasting away the blasphemous devices of their gaseous emittances, and banishing the knowledge that had brought them into being. With blue skies and fertile lands restored, his true believers inherited Larnia, and all was paradise, forever and always. And I think that this is a great concept that one day God very much came to the world and remade it totally. And I know a bit about this, but that is the god that Marullo really wants to kill. And so that where I am in the story is that basically Cameron has knocked Glenda out with a sword and is about to like run away. What I will say is that it's great how quickly the book is moving to the inciting incident. I like that we're right away getting to the prophecy, right away we're getting him moving. There just are so many books that don't want to get to this sort of inciting thing and spend a lot more time establishing things slowly. Sometimes that is important. In a book like this, it absolutely is not, so I'm glad we're moving. On the other hand, I think that there is a lot of missing character detail where I really wanted to understand Glenda and Cameron's relationship context-wise, like how long they've been, how they became friends, something more about their relationship, because they seem to be very close friends. She kind of views him more like a pet, but I still want to understand that more, and we're getting rid of her pretty quickly, but I'm pretty sure she's going to remain in the story or come back in some way. And so far I have like an idea of Sir Cameron and a very approximate idea of the world, which is just sort of a generic fantasy world. But I really just want a little bit more specific and grounding. But I am, again, super early in. I am on chapter 4. Chapter 4 is I like this little In Which again, so we'll read this one. In which an elf is concussed, but it's not really my fault, because what would you have done? Would you not have concussed an elf? No, of course you would have. We all would have concussed an elf. Besides which, I'm very sorry for concussing her, and will try to make amends later if she stops trying to kill me. And also, her intent to kill me was a highly relevant factor in my decision to concuss her. So, great. Anyway, I am curious to see how I feel about this book going in. I'm hoping I will be able to stop, like, being distracted by the things that I keep thinking, this could be better, this should be better, but I haven't seen anything where I'm like, this is problematic, like, nothing about that. I understand the humor not being to a lot of people's taste. I would say overall it's not to my taste, but I also think that a lot of that is because I think the execution is just lacking. It does feel, I don't want to say amateur writing, but it does feel, like very like fresh writing, like, somebody's first book that has been edited, but I just want a bit more editing on there because especially with comedy, I think comedy is such a hard genre to do right and do especially for like a first book that I just need to see a bit more. But I am interested to see like how I'm going to feel about things like character and plot, and hope that I'll be able to put out of my mind some of the things around just the prose and the comment. We'll see how I feel. Well. I return. I am a little over halfway in Sir Cameron at this point, and there's plenty of good news. I think that the book is like pretty good. Like I have been able to put past a lot of that feeling of wanting more from like the comedy and more from the prose, and just read it and appreciate what I think it is doing well. And I think it is doing a lot of things well. Like, I think that the pacing is good. I think that the way a lot of the character relationships and I think the dynamic between Cameron and Marullo is very fun. I definitely still have that, I want a bit more from like character backstory, motivations, a little bit more on like certain world building aspects. I want a lot more from Glenda the elf. But overall, like, I really do see a lot of potential, and a lot of potential that is being successfully met. There just still is that like prose that isn't working. There's definitely humor, and humor is always going to be difficult because it simply will not be some people's cup of tea, and not all of this is, but like, again, I like a lot of it in concept and some of the execution, and I've been enjoying it, really. Like, the point that I've got to is what I would define as a bit of like a part 2. It's not officially so, but there's been sort of a big change up. We'll get there. And that change up is actually the mark of a couple of things where I have some immediate issues, but we will get there. As for the other side of this, where I was trying to read it and consider what I knew of the idea that this was getting a lot of like hate or drama on Tumblr, I've decided to not like read that review that really cracked it open for a lot of people. I think that I'll do that when I'm done with the book and I form my own opinions. So instead, I'm just kind of reading it and trying to look for what those issues might be and where people are feeling these things. So far, I really haven't had anything that I feel any particularly negative way about. I can kind of guess at one or two, but other things that I've heard, like, we'll see, and I'll explain them when we get there, okay? So, previously, Sir Cameron was running his way after concussing Glenda, his friend, the elf. He ran away to go and try and throw himself on the mercy of Marullo, the mad sorcerer. And he does this by just sort of running blindly. Marullo has these constructs, so his army that these soldiers are fighting against are constructs. They seem like they're made of wood, they're magically alive. We get to see him make some, and it's actually this quite cool thing where they are actually made of bones, and then he's doing a magical process to fuse the bones by weaving them together with like branches and things that is combining the two in a way that what results is like a bone-like plant construct thing. And we also learn he's able to control them individually as well as just command them about. So he throws himself on the mercy of some of these and is taken through this impenetrable magic fog wall to Marullo's castle, which is not actually a grand castle. It is just kind of like a very dilapidated, dirty manor house. Like it's like a big house, but it's not actually like a crazy evil villain castle. And Marullo interrogates him about this prophecy thing that he's talking about. Sir Cameron tries to avoid the subject a bit because a key part of this prophecy is like when Sir Cameron dies in a very specific way, then that is what will cause Marullo's downfall. But that kind of implies that, you know, if Cameron just died in the wrong way at the wrong place or time, it should also subvert the prophecy. So Cameron's trying to avoid it a bit. Marullo chains him up on the wall and uses like a magical truth stone to try and compel the truth out of him. And, you know, Cameron eventually kind of gets around to being forced to say what the actual truth is. But he also finds himself kind of turned on by the situation, which is something where this is setting up the dynamic between these two. So Marullo is a old, unclear age, but like he seems like we saw him at the beginning of the book and then 40 years passed. So he's older than Cameron, who is a grown adult man of some amount. And, you know, he is not actually, and I really enjoy this and love this, not conventionally attractive. He's sort of this like frail looking, a bit skinny, like he has like wrinkles and like especially around like his forehead and eyes and things like that. He's like just seems a bit gaunt and unpleasant and like, you know, has a bit of greasy hair. Like he doesn't seem like he takes great care of himself, and he's not conventionally attractive, and I think that that's great. And he's this quite grumpy and negative, and he's just kind of interested only in his plan to kill God and pretty much nothing else. Cameron is really trying to suck up to him. He tries to like seduce him, endear himself to him, do like anything, and Marullo is just not having that, not interested in that. But we also get the sense that Marullo is a bit lonely. I mean, he lives here. He's been fighting this war for at least 40 years. He doesn't seem to have any company, any friends, any family, just these constructs that aren't really like sentient. And it's also sees that one of the things that when Cameron's trying to get Marullo's attention while he's running away, he shouts out like, I'm here, I have information about this prophecy, I want to help you take down God. And it seems like that is actually what made Marullo take interest in actually, fetching Cameron and bringing him here. Because one of the things that's also so isolating is that no one really takes an interest in why Marullo wants to kill God. the notion of killing God, and he does seem legitimately quite interested in the idea of somebody else expressing interest in that. Like that's kind of a shared interest. I mean, Cameron doesn't really have the similar feelings. He is just trying to say what he thinks Marullo wants him to hear. But it is something that then, as time goes on and their relationship does progress, it is something that Cameron tries to show more interest in and learn a bit more about, and that is something that then Marullo is actually interested and excited to kind of teach him about. Excited in a very, like, grumpy, rude way. But still, the other aspect to their relationship is that Cameron he's basically just a bit of a brat, and Marullo is then in this not really, but also kind of twinge of BDSM relationship to it, where Cameron is someone who is obnoxious and always wants attention and always wants to kind of suck up to and endear himself to Marullo to keep himself alive, while Marullo is tolerating it because he seems to enjoy having perhaps some company, but also just how pathetic and lame Cameron is. Like, it is something where he could have just killed Cameron, but instead he's subverting it by, first he turns him into a vulture, and Cameron spends a while as just a vulture, but even as a vulture where he's free to fly around and be free of this prophecy thing, he still goes and hangs out with Marullo and tries to speak to him and continues to be a bit annoying, even tries to still, like, try to seduce him, because Cameron just wants what's best for Cameron. And I really enjoy his time as a vulture. I really wish that he spent more time as a vulture, but honestly, all things considered, we get several vulture chapters, and that's fun. I want a vulture. I found myself saying a normal sentence, which is that I really like the pseudo BDSM relationship between this grumpy evil wizard who wants to kill God and this irritating vulture that was once a man that he keeps around for the fun of bullying. But even then, like, again, it's not actually harsh bullying. There's, like, a bit of mild, don't want to say, like, torture, but pain being inflicted to kind of keep Cameron in his place at points. But it's not severe. It's like he puts a magical, invisible key thing in his chest that he's able to then electrocute Cameron with. But there is a certain, like, playful-ish dynamic to it where it isn't really that sure how much Marullo is feeling this in the same ways that Cameron is, where Cameron is kind of finding himself having fun, finding himself increasingly endeared to Marullo, and like this new life, he's actually finds himself increasingly happy in this weird new existence than he's ever been while being a knight. And it's hard to get a read on what Marullo is thinking, but he keeps keeping him around and keeps, doing things for him, even in a basic way. So after Cameron spends a while as a vulture before he suggests that he could be turned into a woman. And this is because, again, the prophecy seemed very specific and seemed like it was describing Cameron exactly as he was, so exactly as a man. So if he was a woman, this is Cameron's way of trying to get himself back to a human body, because he does kind of miss having human capabilities. Then he would be able to, just exist as a woman for a bit. So Cameron gets turned into a woman, and he is, again, just trying to seduce Marullo, and he just has no game at all. He kind of thinks that he has so much more, but he just has none. But, as a woman, Cameron is, like, super attractive, but it's something where he calls Marullo out, like, wow, you must be a bit of a perv, because, like, look at me, I have huge tits and I'm really hot. And Marullo's like, the spell just makes you what you would have been if you had been a, bodily sex-wise. It just switches that around. I did not pick out this design, because Cameron is also meant to be just, like, super hot, actually. And I think that this is one of the areas where there's been, like, talk of some issues people have had with it. I really don't feel that there is an issue going on here. It's something where the book does still have, like, a mention of and things of, like, the idea of bodily sex and gender and people being able to use magic to change that. That's something that some people are said to, save up a lot of money to go find a mage to like have that done to them. It's something that one thing that I felt was missing is that Cameron as a woman doesn't really spend any time reflecting or thinking about like the existence of being in a different body. It's something where I feel like it isn't necessarily required. It's not like he had to get gender dysmorphia, body dysmorphia, but also he just sort of is straight to rolling along with it beyond having like some discomfort and frustration with like having big tits. And it's mostly just like he's totally fine. And I think that's okay, but I also did want to get some perspective more on how he felt about women and how he felt about looking in a mirror and seeing somebody else and what it was like to like exist in a different body like that. But he did spend a while being a vulture, so I guess I could have seen the same thing there. But at the other hand, I do feel like there is more of a difference between that and like the human body and the presentation outwardly of that. So I think that there's been some stuff people talking about that, but I really don't see much of an issue. It's true that when he's a woman, he spends most of his time cleaning the castle. This is though because this is what Cameron has been pitching, and he pitched it when he was a man before I think he was a vulture, of like, hey, your castle's really like grimy and stuff. I could make myself useful. I could clean things up. He's in a vulture body for a while. When he's in a woman body, he then spends a lot of time being told like, okay, so you said you'd clean the place up, so go clean it up. And so he does a really, really bad job of that. Increasingly a little bit better, but he's never really that good at it. He just spends a long time doing it because he's trying to endear himself to Marullo. And again, like, so yeah, he's in a woman's body and then he spends a lot of time in the woman's body doing cleaning housework. But I don't think that that is anything like misogynistic or sexist or whatever. That's something, when he gets turned into a man after the period of time when he's a woman, because he gets back to his original body, he goes and continues to do housework and cleaning. This is just something he volunteered to do because it's one of the only things that he could, offer to make himself useful in any way. So, like, I think it's totally fine. While he's in this body, and while he's in a vulture body, we get start to get, like, hints of some of the world building going on. And so, while he's in a vulture body, at one point, Marullo meets up with this chancellor, and they're doing an illicit trade of something. And these are like some forbidden artifacts. They're forbidden books. They're noted as having like these glassy, shiny covers and written in like a strange language. And at one point, Marullo shows one of these books, and it is, there's like an apple in the center, two astonished children staring at it. And he describes that what is inside of this book is physics, because physics was destroyed when God came in the descent and rewrote the world. And magic came to replace physics, but physics was the law of the old world. And we are getting kind of a sense increasingly that that there is a world that came before. This was already hinted at with like the ancients had these machines that polluted the air and stuff. This is forbidden technology. Specifically, this is like a children's physics textbook, it seems. And when later Marullo is talking to Cameron in his library, as Cameron kind of asks a few questions, and this is where Marullo takes an interest in trying to like teach him. He's not very good at learning anything, but trying to teach him, talk to him, give him like books about the old world and what happened in the descent and all that. Marullo reveals that when God came, many things were rewritten about the world, and the world didn't used to have a lot of things. It didn't used to have like unicorns or anything, and it didn't used to have elves. Dragons didn't used to exist. But what there were dragons were AI. So back in the day, we understand that actually the old world was a very futuristic Earth. He shows a diagram of the solar system with Earth and other planets. and humanity had expanded into the stars. There was a colony on Mars, there was some expansion, I think, further, and dragons were actually these huge AI supercomputers that were, forces that were essentially more like kings. They were ruling forces of power. And elves used to be like celebrities and influencers, by the way. And when God came, whatever this God actually is, it rewrote the world to obey this new laws and ideas of a fantasy world and just sort of took things and recategorized them. So it saw the AI supercomputers and made them into dragons as a sort of equivalent kind of thing. Celebrities and influencers and people who were described as like fashionably changing their bodies and things were made to be the elves who, look different and fancier and, they're more magic and special. So that's actually, I really do think that this is a very neat world building concept. I like it. I think that the information is doled out. This is something I knew ahead of time. And so reading the book, I've been able to spot smaller references to things. And I think there is a good amount of information lead up to the reveals. The reveals don't take a long time to get there. They're not treated as a huge total revelation either. We're getting bits of it, but you figure out what's going on pretty quickly, but all the information is still additive rather than being repetitive. So I like this. While Cameron is a woman, at one point he needs clothing because he finds he really needs a bra, basically. So he gets Marullo to take him in disguise using magic to a nearby town to go and do some shopping. While they're out there, and he gets new clothing. And while he's there, at one point they kind of separate. Marullo's like, you should just go home. And he's like, I just want to hang out here for a bit and you continue doing your shopping and then we'll meet back here. And Cameron actually just wants to get beer and a pretzel. And he decides that since he wasn't left with any money, he'll just go and seduce a guard using, his great charm. Well, actually not guard, a knight. It's one of the knights that was actually in his regiment. Because back in the day, he saw knights do this kind of thing all the time where they'd flirt with local women and buy them drinks and food. And he's like, well, I'll just go and make sure that happens because I want some free food and beer. So he talks to this guard and the guard is increasingly making uncomfortable advances to him. The guard is clearly very interested in one thing. Cameron is just trying to get his stuff and go, but also wants to talk about himself. So he talks to the knight and he's asking, hey, I heard about this Cameron guy and how there's this prophecy and things like that. And the knight is just kind of yeah, you've heard of that guy. And while talking about it, he learns that he's really disliked. He just keeps trying to find I heard this great guy. Okay. Let's see. Sir Cameron, okay. So this is him talking about with the knights. He's like, oh, there was a complication, but there's this knight called Sir Cameron that I've heard about. And the guy he's talking to, Gareth, says, little miss well-informed. We'll have to keep an eye on you, eh? But you're right, it's that shithead Cameron. God curse him to the abyss. Oh, I said through gritted teeth. From when I heard, he was quite beloved. That coward? The knight guffawed. No, his father bribed the order to take him off his hand. Only reason he survived till now is some junky elf took him for a pet. Walked him about on a leash, I bet, else he'd be scrap meat on the front lines by now. Nobody human could stand that man. I heard he was handsome, I said, grinding my jaw, like a knight from a storybook. Sure, Gareth conceded, then rubbed his beard. How do I explain this? Have you ever talked to someone who is obviously shaping their replies to please you, except their guesses are like a blind man throwing at a dartboard? It leaves you feeling kind of soiled, like you've been talking to a poorly made shell. He tapped his own head demonstratively. Nothing behind the eyes. That's, I took a swig of ale, then another longer gulp. That's a bit judgmental, isn't it? Noting my drained mug, the knight waved at the bar for a refill. He turned back to me. You'd understand if you met the guy. Point is, our men were plenty pleased when the prophecy became broader knowledge. Rid ourselves of a collective pain in the ass and off the mad sorcerer all in one go. How's that for 2 birds, 1 stone? And they continue on just talking. Cameron is kind of increasingly trying to defend himself, like, oh, I heard he was handsome. I heard that his clothing and he was really well dressed and that it's really good. And it's just, he's learning how much that he was actually just, nobody liked him. Nobody was his friend. He thought that he was really charming. Nobody even considers him to be charming or handsome or basically anything but really annoying and a loser, which he finds very upsetting. And at the same time, the knight is also trying to make a move on him, but Marullo returns in time, that he kind of intervenes. And after this, while Cameron is very upset, and there's a bit of a fight, where the knight follows them out, they get into a bit of a fight. Cameron kisses Marullo, and Marullo seems to, like, also kiss him back a bit, but, you know, we're still really getting very mixed signals, I would say. But that is kind of the start of it, and it doesn't take a long time after this point for them to kind of get into more of a physical relationship. They have sex, and by first kind of doing some, like, teasing and a weird sort of scene thing, Cameron is breaking plates on purpose, and again, really more of, like, playing a brat archetype, and Marullo is getting kind of genuinely annoyed, but also kind of is into the, like, more game side of it, the scene of it, and yeah, so they wind up having sex. It's off-page sex, there's no, like, details kind of thing, but we get a lot of, like, the lead up to it. And it is like a level of, again, I think it really is fun. I think that this is a enjoyable kind of silly dynamic that really fits the characters, but also there is something there where you're like, yeah, I recognize why this is working. I recognize what the reality of this is outside of, like, the kind of comedy fantasy world that we're in. Like, I think it's entirely fine. And let's see, I'm looking through here to see what else I need to comment on. Plot-wise, yeah, so they kind of have a thing. They have increasing levels of certain bits of affection. It's still kind of unclear how much of the affection is reciprocated or how much Cameron's feeling, Marullo's feeling, but you do have a sense of their growing relationship and what, like, Cameron is increasingly just, again, really enjoying and liking what's going on here. When Marullo reveals that as part of his plan, he is going to almost certainly be dead, basically not really here in a way that matters, basically. Like, he won't exist in the same way, is sort of what he says, actually. And that really upsets Cameron. And Cameron is kind of like, you know, under, like, the effects of being like, use this truth thing on me and I'll tell you. He's like, I don't know that I could help you kill God if that means killing you. Otherwise, I totally would, but I'm not sure about that, because he doesn't want Marullo to die, and is very frustrated by the idea of, like, helping out in what is this big suicide thing. He's like, couldn't we just live like this? Couldn't we run away somewhere else and just do something else? Like, why do we have to follow through and kill God? People like the world as is, and, you know, it's okay enough. Like, do we really have to go back? Do you even know what the future will be? And even if you don't know what the future will be, or you do, you apparently won't even be here for it. So he's quite upset by this. And what happens at this point, let me see. Cameron gets himself turned back into a man because he has a period. So in his female body, he starts having a period and really freaks out. He doesn't even know what a period is. But I'm not surprised. It doesn't really seem like he's had much of an education or spent, like, any time with women. And he's really freaks out and is really uncomfortable and things, and Marullo's like, okay, yeah, I'll change you back. And even though that puts, like, the prophecy thing at risk, they're kind of like, well, no one's breached the castle so far or anything, and it's fine. So they just kind of agree it's okay. You get the sense that this isn't really like a plot hole about like, this is a stupid thing to do. It does seem like it's fine. Okay, like most of the body switching around was way more for Marullo's fun than it really seemed to matter so much about subverting the prophecy, avoiding the prophecy. If he really cared about that more, he would have just killed Cameron immediately, and he doesn't want to do that. So he changes back. Oh, it's worth noting that the magic system in this world, I like the magic system in this world a lot. I think it's a really neat concept, which is that magic is extremely finite. So everyone is born with an amount of magic, and once you use it up, it is gone forever. Most people are born with basically no magic at all. Like Cameron, like everybody, was born with like a tiny little bit of magic, but it would have only been enough to basically like make a pebble levitate, is the level that he says. And so it's very traditional for people who are born with very minimal magic to give it up in a tithe to the church. So there's a ceremony he describes where all of the like local children at a certain coming of age kind of thing go and read along with a ritual held by an elder of the church that drains them of all of their magic at once and fuels it into one thing. In this case, it was part of a project to build a levitating cathedral. So they're essentially providing all of their magic to help with like a little bit of some of the rocks that are needed to make them float and assemble for a cathedral. And, you know, because nobody's ever really going to have use for their magic if they only have a tiny bit, that totally makes sense. I like the idea of this. It also creates a scenario where people who do have magic, elves tend to have like by far the most, but also there are some humans who do, are really, really stingy with it because you can't just use it for charitable acts. You're going to run out pretty quickly. Some people might, but again, it really, really means that it changes how people have to think about magic if they have it. You are studying for a very long time to learn to use magic without having to use it. And it also is why Marullo is so, like, terrifying, because Marullo is doing magic all of the time. He has this horrible magic fog wall. He has an army of constructs. He's able to just really willy-nilly do magical stuff to Cameron, like, change his entire body, and it doesn't seem to be costing him anything. He just has this huge well of it. At one point, he gives Cameron, as a vulture, a dragon scale, which is, dragons are like beings of pure magic, because they used to be beings of pure technology, I guess. And the dragon scale is something that, like, part of a dragon contains so much magic, and he just kind of crunches it up and uses it as a temporary protection spell for Cameron the vulture, because he kind of makes a remark about being a bit afraid that he's going to get shot at one point when they're going to meet, like, that chancellor. So I think that this is a great little magic system. I think that's very neat. I would be very interested in a like proper high fantasy setting that really explored it, but also just in this much more low fantasy setting, it still is like neat and I like it. So, right. Basically, what happens at this point is that yeah, they have their fight where Marullo is basically talking about how he's gonna go like kill himself as part of this whole plan. Cameron gets upset. They have a fight. Marullo's kind of like, well, get out of here then. You can just leave. And Cameron's like, yeah, so I will just go. And he packs up all his stuff and he goes to leave. And then as he's leaving, he's like, you know what? Marullo's had to deal with me being annoying and sticking around for this long. I'm gonna just keep doing it and he'll have to force me out. And as he's deciding that he's going to actually just stay, Glenda the elf shows up and kidnaps him. So Glenda, we have been getting a couple chapters from Glenda's POV, third person. They are very short. They're usually like 2 pages long. They're necessary because they are helping us show that she is the villain right now, but also they're not, because they're not giving us enough. Like, a lot of her chapters, more information is dispersed in the preamble, the little in which Glenda does this and this. there'll be a lot of details there about like in which Glenda uses her family's resources to advance her rank through this sort of thing that isn't in the chapter text. Like we're just learning what she's been doing, and then the actual scene will be a very short scene, usually one that isn't doing a lot. And Glenda as a character is not doing much, not doing enough. I don't really know what to make of her. The fact that we're seeing her and checking in on her is mostly because otherwise we'd have a thing where like Cameron concussed her and ran away, and then we didn't see her at all, and then she returns through a portal to kidnap him. And I guess that would not be as satisfying, question mark, as if we saw that she was angry and acting against him. But at the same time, I don't like what we're actually seeing here. So what we learn is that Glenda is, okay. So in her first appearance, she was super emotional and seemed a bit like she was swinging between like a lot of strong emotions. She seemed very sad, but also excited and angry about like Cameron's prophecy and coming death and all these things. And what we learn immediately after she's been hit on the head is that she is addicted to something called passion weed. And this is something that she chews, and it gives you the ability to feel emotions very intensely. Apparently, all her life, she's had like nearly no emotions. Like she basically has nothing. And so she's been taking this very regularly, but also like her other elf friend is like, wow, you're taking it so much. You really must have like a problem to take this much. Because she's kind of addicted to like the emotional highs. She talks about how she took a bunch of it, like a double dose, right when she last saw Cameron, because she was so excited to get him to his execution and the feelings that she would feel when she saw him die. And now, on the advice of her friend, she's gone off passion weed completely, and so she is just kind of numb but super angry. Like that's all she really has. And I don't know what this is doing, I say. Like, I don't know what this is doing in a character sense or plot sense, or if this is something about like how elves are often written to be, like how I guess in the beginning we're meant to think that she's sort of a dewy-eyed, softy, gentle nature elf, and then now we're learning that she's actually like, that was fake, and that she's actually this like cold, brutal, super pissed off elf. But I don't really know how that isn't much of a subversion. I don't think one was set up and this is a subversion. And then we don't really have enough of her character before or after for this to again feel like it's doing anything beyond just me going, okay, so I guess that's her deal. But we aren't seeing much. Like Glenda is such a thing where I feel like she is this biggest black hole in the story and narrative because I want to understand more about her relationship with Cameron so that I care at all about what's happened since, but I just don't. I don't have any information. I don't have any sense of it. It isn't really thought about or discussed, but then it is ultimately, you know, this is where we're getting to this big climactic moment, like this part 2 finale. First part finale into part 2. And I just have nothing to go off of beyond like, okay, so yeah, she's been super pissed off. She has like some brain, like a concussion, and they actually then follow through with the whole concussion thing to be like, yeah, she legitimately had a concussion. She has like migraines and like light sensitivity and feels really unwell a lot of the time, which just makes her even more angry and ready to kill Cameron. And so she spends some time like getting the army more together, arranging everything, really stepping up to help win this war, turn things around just so she can kill Cameron. And we don't see a lot of that happen. It just is this occasional chapter until suddenly she kidnaps him. And she kidnaps him, brings him to a church where he's allowed to like, you know, make peace of God, which Cameron refuses to do. And then she takes him to the site that he's due to be killed at for the prophecy. He tries to talk to her like, oh, you know, I thought we were friends, and, you know, I don't think that the mad sorcerer is that bad of a guy. I don't think that these things are all of these things, but we're just not getting a lot. Glenda sets it up and kills him the way that he's meant to be killed, and Cameron totally does die. We then get a number of chapters that are like completely blank. We get chapter 24, in which there is nothing. So that's always just a fun little, decorative thing. Chapter 25, in which I am nothing. And then we cut to Glenda's POV for the next few chapters, where Glenda is going and leading an assault on the castle. She turns Cameron into a skin flag and waves him around as she goes to lay siege. When she smashes into the castle and finds Marullo, he's in the midst of doing some sort of magical sigil on the ground. And then he completes the spell right as they are beginning to fight. And the spell is a time spell, and it goes back in time to basically right before Cameron is going to die. Everybody kind of just wakes up there. They have full memory of what went on, but are just back and confused. And this time, before Glenda can kill Cameron, a dragon shows up. So just a portal opens in the sky, and then this black dragon emerges. It is breathing pure magic. I really like that as well. Let's see. The dragon wheeled, black and terrible, breathing nauseating torrents of what looked to be raw magic. Charging knights transformed into trimmed shrubbery, while flung weapons bloomed into flowers of enormous size, which defied the mood by drifting peacefully back to earth. Unicorns, rearing and bucking, became bestial in the dragon's passing breath, pulling off their riders to sink teeth into the crevices of their armor. The earth danced and broke around me, swallowing men in sulfur-stinking gashes. A man rushed at me, yodeling with his sword out, only to disappear into a crack that promptly sealed, his sword arm protruding from the ground like some sort of bizarre plant. I think that that's fun. So the dragon comes and fights off some of the people around, and then it picks up Cameron in its talons, flies a degree, and then they kind of crash land. The dragon does the thing where it holds Cameron close to the chest and then just kind of somersaults around. It's a very clumsy landing. The dragon seems to be quite injured, and then the dragon transforms into Marullo. And we get, "Oh my god, Marullo, someone turned you into a dragon?" The sorcerer's breath wheezed. I drew close to hear his faint words. "I am a dragon, you fucking imbecile." Having expended the last of his energy, Marullo slackened, eyes closing. And this is the start of a very, very long chapter, honestly, chapter 30. And what we learn is that Marullo is a dragon. That's why he has so much magic. His body is literally made of magic. He's been a dragon this whole time. There's been hints to that. And he's extremely injured. He, used up basically all of his magic in that time spell, which is really sweet, actually, because he saved Cameron, but also it means that he is kind of doomed. And this is where we get a kind of weird thing in what I feel like the plot has been well set up, well paced, information is introduced and used, and then here's just kind of the sudden other thing. So he's like, "I need help. I have to make contact with ... someone." And they start to work on making a summoning thing. Specifically, Marullo's like, "You need to cut off one of my toes. I don't have any magic, but my body's made of pure magic, so you can just cut off a toe and that'll be enough for me to cast the spell." And the spell contacts somebody who turns out to be his sister. I don't feel like it was really hinted or suggested that he had a sister until then. The sister is this, she has a very strong personality, and she kind of she just feels like she really comes out of nowhere. This sister, she's also a dragon. She just keeps way out of human business. And so she's just like, "Marullo, you're kind of eccentric and annoying and a bit crazy." And they've been having a fight recently because Marullo stole her microwave. But she shows up and then takes them with her. So she, I know, is a character where this is where one of the like controversial things coming up is about this character. So she is huge. As a dragon, she is absolutely gigantic. Like Marullo is very large as well, but she is notably much bigger. And Marullo notes that basically dragons have sexual dimorphism, and so the she is just way bigger. And when she's in human form, she is also very large. She's described as a giant woman, muscular, broad-shouldered, big of hip and thigh and breast, just ... large. And so she is also... I peered at the two of them in disbelief. With her tawny complexion, wild mane of burgundy hair, and overall glow of health and vitality, the woman could not have looked more dissimilar to my poor, pasty Marullo. Yeah, so she is basically like this very big, boisterous, muscular, masculine woman, I guess, and she also has darker skin. I mean, tawny, I'm not really sure what tone that is. But, you know, it's not like Marullo is like super pasty and white, so it's different and a bit darker. And I know that there's some idea of basically this book doesn't really have, there's been one character confirmed with dark skin. There's not a lot of characters in the book, but the chancellor that they meet with was dark skinned. And so she is this, like, the other next dark skinned character we've seen. And then she's like big and muscular and strong and like loud. I wouldn't call her like aggressive, but she definitely like reads more so. And so there is the idea of like, is that falling in with negative stereotypes of like darker skinned women, women of color? I'm gonna read more of the book and I'll read that review. When I'm encountering this, as much as I do think, okay, yes, if you only have like one person of color, and I'm not sure that she actually is, I don't know what the intention is, but if you have that and then she's only this one example that then fits certain negative like stereotypes and ideas, that could be problematic. On the other hand, I do think that she's like, as a dragon and as a character who is just sort of like, she's just like a big muscular woman, I don't see anything immediately where I'm like, this is actually leading into stereotypes. This is actually, you know, fulfilling these ideas in any particular way. I'm gonna read more, but I do know that this is one of the things that came up with like contention and why the book was labeled at points as being racist. And currently, I will just say, I don't think that I agree with that. I am saying this as a white person, but from what I'm reading and what I'm seeing so far, and then when I'm done with the book and other things, I'll come back and talk about this more. I just am like, yeah, well, she's just large and goes outside. I'm not sure that she actually is a person of color, if Marullo's super white, but also they are both dragons, and I don't know. So yeah, she shows up. What I have a biggest issue with her so far is that she just kind of comes out of nowhere and she rescues them and she takes them underwater to an underwater city that is from the old Earth, where God's like corruption and transformation couldn't penetrate the deep ocean, I guess. So a lot of technology is still able to work down in this old underwater city. This is a place that, when the apocalypse of God was happening, was sealed off by people. There's still apparently like dead bodies around. There's this old remains though of like a futuristic city. This is where the sister has been living. Her name is Hydna. I think it's Hydna. And Hydna has just been like living and chilling here. This is apparently where their mother took the eggs out of the church of these two and raised them here. I don't know if their mother was a dragon. I think she was also a dragon. In terms of, again, like a kind of random other plot reveal, is that they also have another sister. And this is like definitely not been mentioned. I know that the other sister has been mentioned once in a different context because I know what happens in this book. So I know that the sister has been mentioned once, not as the sister, but as just a person that, a person that has been heard of by Hilda. But yeah, it's very random to me. Just like Hydna showing up, they just sort of say, okay, let me read. So Cameron asks, like, are there other dragons in hiding? And Marullo answers, we're the last Hydna and me. And then he goes and says, after a little more conversation, I lied just now, Marullo said, startling me. Hydna and we are not the last. He withdrew his head, sitting straighter on the bench. One other remains, a half-elf. Not a foundling like myself or Hydna, but the last remaining flesh of our mother. She is lost, though. And I wasn't sure how to respond to this confession. Lost? Raised by elves, a follow of the church. Every year I trade for information, but it never changes. Demetia remains theirs. Demetia? I don't know how to say her name. But Demetia remains theirs. And she can't be reasoned with? The benefits of having multiple muscular dragon women on our side seemed obvious. Marullo tipped his head back to watch the silver flashes of passing fish. Hydna and I are in agreement. Demetia is too dangerous to make contact with. Dragons cannot war with other dragons. The level of clashing power would end in disaster for more than just ourselves. So, again, like, this is this random thing where it's like, oh, you have a sister? Oh, you have another secret half-elf sister? And I know that other sister is now going to become plot important. So as we kind of start the second part, as they're in this underwater city, taking shelter after all of this, Marullo's drained his magic, they are living with the sister, we're just also being introduced to this, like, other sister, and, like, I don't know what the rest of the plot exactly is going to be, but this is a thing where, like, up until this point, I've been really enjoying it. And then I get here and I'm like, this just seems really clumsy and a bit weird. It feels too sudden. I don't like that this is like the turn of direction. It feels like the book is about to then, I expect, like, halt for a while or just go in another very weird direction that won't make much sense. I don't really know. But yeah, that's where I am so far. Hope that this has been interesting to listen to. And yeah, we will see. We will see, basically. Like, again, I wouldn't say that I'm loving the book, but considering how I felt so conflicted in the beginning, I overall have enjoyed it a lot more in the second part. And I'm hoping the last part I will still enjoy it. I still don't think that it's a book that I'm going to be, like, rating 5 stars or even 4 stars. But I definitely am not feeling like it's really that bad in any of the ways that I kind of heard about through drama, or even that my first impressions were. Ooh, hi. Okay, I'm back. I've read the second half of Sir Cameron. I have also checked in with, like I say, it's not like there was actually a huge Tumblr drama about this, okay? I was just on the fringes of this, I heard about this, checked it out. So it's not the biggest deal, but there was that one review that, like I say, seemed to be the cracking it open. That's what people were referring to in the tags and vague posting about and things like that. And that review, I think, was later deleted. I found a copy that somebody else kept on an archive of, like, the Internet Archive. So I double-checked that, because that was sort of what brought my attention to the idea that there were going to be various issues in Sir Cameron. And that's what people were talking about. And okay, good news and bad news. I mean, the good news is I don't agree. I looked again at that review, and I think that they were really articulate. This is not like a response to that one review by somebody who I don't even know. I think they're very articulate about a lot of their issues and thoughts, and especially overall thoughts of the plot. I disagree entirely with what wound up being a section of it, which is that they were saying, I can't believe an editor let any of this go unless they were really conservative themselves, and then listed, like, fat phobia, transphobia. I'm going to talk to you about those things, but I really disagree with what that person actually pointed out, because a lot of the lines that they take, and they quoted a lot, I love quoting a lot, but they were just quoting, like, the bad guy. And there's a lot to discuss with the bad guy. the bad guy being Glenda. But Glenda is, you know, in the text is just like a huge bigot. And I'm going to talk about a lot of the things and issues with that. But to put what she is saying or thinking negatively towards other characters and saying that is a problem with the book and the author, rather than, again, like you can extrapolate into, it is a problem because the author wrote this into a villain but didn't like develop it enough. And like, okay, but that isn't the same as the author thinking those things or the book portraying those things as true in any way. So I will talk about some things and things I didn't like, but I just, this book isn't problematic. It isn't. Like, it's, I think if anything, there are definitely points I can point out as awkward in some bits, especially of around representation, but it's just, it's too extreme to actually be saying there's definitely ableism going on here and there's definitely this. In fact, here's the, I guess, bad news side of this. The bad news is there definitely just isn't that much going on. I did not like the second half of this book as much as I liked that middle chunk in the beginning. Like, the second half, it really feels like the book had a plot and a story for the first half, but that wasn't long enough to be a book. And so the second half, it feels very drawn out. It feels very meandering. The characters are just kind of treading water. Marullo and Cameron's relationship is just both it's not progressing. It's not going backwards. It's just kind of nothing going on. I felt like I lost so much like of Cameron's voice, which has always been a bit lacking for him being a first-person narrative. Like I said in the beginning, I feel like if he's going to be this really bold character and personality, that needs to be even more so in internal thoughts. I think that first person just doesn't make sense for this book. And especially again in the latter half, it really feels like Cameron is just kind of pulled away to be kind of really generic and not really anything, and that's how I felt about so much in the second half of this book. And also I thought a lot of Glenda. So, second half of this book. Like I said, there's sort of this sudden rush of information where we learn about Hydna, who is Marullo's sister, and she takes them to an underwater city that was abandoned by humans because God's corruption can't penetrate deep water, I guess, you know. And they also learned about Demetria. Demetria is their, I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce it actually. It's Domitia? Domitia? Maybe it's Domitia. So, Domitia, who is their half-sister, kind of, she's half elf, half dragon, and she is introduced as one of our main characters way too late in the story. I mean, what's interesting is that Glenda goes and seeks out Domitia and is like, I need to go and get your help for tracking down Cameron. So their chapters become, because we've had Glenda chapters in between, we're getting a bit more, and the chapters that are Glenda and Domitia are a little longer, but they're still very sparse and very, like, little snippets of things. I think I've complained about this, the beginning chapter, where it says chapter 26, and then it gives, like, a little in which da-da-da-da-da. A lot of the in whiches are not only, like, not funny, a lot of the times they are containing information that isn't relevant to the chapter within. It's information that is, like, relevant for the first sentence or two, or from the last chapter's ending, but doesn't actually encompass it in an in which manner, and I do find that a bit annoying. I just think that, like with anything, if you're gonna do a little gimmicky thing like that, I think you have to really commit hard to the gimmick, and this book has a couple times where that in which section is funny and is enjoyable. A lot of them, it just feels very extra. So, Domitia and Glenda team up to go track down Cameron. Domitia is honestly given more personality and backstory and interest than Glenda ever gets. And that's just another really big issue. The biggest issue I have with the plot of this book, the story, like with the book in general, is that the Glenda chapters feel so unnecessary, yet also kind of are forced to be necessary. And we just never get a picture of Glenda's history, her story, her like anything. And in the second half too, the main thing that we really get, because the first half it was so sparse, is that like Glenda is a huge bigot, which it was already there, but because she's interacting with Domitia, it's brought up way more. And so Glenda is homophobic, she's transphobic, she's fatphobic. All of these things are things that are specifically because of her belief in the church and also just in her like elven superiority. So we understand where the beliefs come from in that regard, but we don't explore her exact relationship with the church beyond just she's really devout in it. So she thinks all the things that the church wants her to think 100%, and she just believes it on the basis of, well, the church says it, so it's true. And I understand that is how it works a lot of the time with religion, but because the church just isn't fully fleshed out, it's just kind of a generic evil church, she isn't made more fleshed out by her believing in it, because I don't really know what that means. I don't know how she started, I guess, from birth, but her relationship to that is very important, especially if I'm following her as ultimately the antagonist. She is the only one who really is like stirring things up against Cameron and Marullo. She's the one who like turned this whole war around to get like the attack going, to bring the prophecy to happen. Now in the second half, when they've escaped underwater, she's the one who gets Domitia and is going to find where they went, and then later like getting Domitia to attack them in the underwater city. Like, Glenda's the driving force here, but all I really have is that she had a concussion and she's super pissed off about it. She has a drug problem, kind of, but it's not really, like, ever explored or deepened in any way, and it's not even really coming up. Like, she sort of just goes sober right away in the book and feels bad physically. But again, it's not something that we're ever given any depth to. So I'm just kind of sitting here with a character and I'm like, okay, I understand why she is being really rude to Domitia. Domitia is fat. As a half-elf, she looks a lot like an elf, but elves are basically all like small, kind of short, like skinny, like just naturally so. It said that it's not really, doesn't seem like it's really possible for an elf to just naturally be fat because of, you know, magic biology. But Domitia is, and that really annoys and frustrates Glenda. She really wants to make it clear to any time that they talk to humans together. She really thinks to herself about how she wants to make it clear that she's the normal elf and Domitia is just a weirdo. She calls Domitia like a half mongrel like the whole time. Which, now that I think about it, isn't mongrel something that means like mixed breed? So wouldn't it just be, no, she calls her a mongrel, not a half mongrel. I mean, does that really make it better? Which, she knows Domitia's name, but she calls her that the whole time internally. And again, like, I have no problem with, and I know this is something that like, when the book came out, the author, I remember seeing like posts about it, and I think that this is something that a lot of people get too mixed up on, which is that like, yeah, it's okay for a villain to be a bigot, that they are the villain, they are a bad guy, she's acting on beliefs that we as the reader can recognize internally are wrong and that the narrative is showing is wrong. Like, that's fine, that doesn't reflect like horrible beliefs on the author. I just feel like it's here, but it's not adding anything more. And it doesn't have to add a lot, but just if Glenda was given something else, man. She's just not, like, anything. And we're following Domitia more, and Domitia is, like, quite interesting. We still don't know a lot about her, but she is a healer, and she uses, because she's half dragon, she's full of magic, so she uses that to bestow all kinds of things to people. She only helps people who are hurt or need help, but she helps them very freely, which is very rare. She has a living like hut that walks around on 4 goat legs. It's sort of made of living wood and nature. She is very kind and empathetic. She immediately takes pity on Glenda. She sees that Glenda has been quite hurt and is having a hard time. The concussion is something that she is able to pick up on and magically treat. She also notes that, like, she can tell Glenda's been using passion weed, and she's like, well, it's okay, you know, a lot of people have, like, trouble with mental illness, basically, like depression and things like that, but I wouldn't recommend passion weed, really, because the highs and lows can make it so much harder. In fact, this is an herb that I'd suggest, and I can help you, like, find some. Like, she's prescribing SSRIs magically here. And she also has this backstory where she's a half-dragon, but her father was an elf. And when she was born, it was clear that she was a mixed species, and the elves, like, surgically corrected her. So they removed all of her dragon parts. And not only that, they, like, took the dragon bits to use for magic stuff. Like, her wings were taken that she was born with by her father for use in magic rituals because they're full of magic. So, like, a really horrific backstory there. But she seems interesting. Like, again, I would have been really interested to hear more about her if she had been in the first half of the book and we spent way more time developing her and also Glenda. She also is, like, a believer in the church. That's something that she was kind of first brought up with, is that she was, like, faithful. And that's why Marullo and Hydna were not dealing with her at all. They didn't want to, like, talk to her or get involved because she was faithful, so she'd oppose them. And then we see her, and she's doing and believes all of these things that are contrary to church belief. And that's interesting. I don't really know then her relationship to faith either. Towards the end of the book, she gives, like, a nice little talk about a little bit of that. But I just wanted more, because these are the characters who are now really doing things. Cameron and Marullo are holed up in the underwater city, working on the ritual to find and kill God. And that's just something that, like, Cameron isn't really able to be involved in. So he spends the latter half of the book wandering around the underwater city, exploring it. He helps them out with small tasks and errands. He's trying to talk to Marullo about the whole, like, I don't want you to die. So he's trying to find ways to maybe, like, show Marullo that there's still interesting things in this world, and trying to, like, come up with reasons to get him to want to change his mind about potentially destroying himself when destroying the world. But he isn't really successful at that. He and Hydna and Marullo hang out a little bit. Hydna and Marullo have a very strained relationship that Cameron is kind of interested in maybe trying to repair, but, you know, he's not really able to do too much on that. You know, there are bits of things going on, but there isn't really any, like, hard development. The most is that towards the end, Marullo gets his arm and leg cut off to be used in the ritual. And so there is a bit of, like, having them detached, put away. He makes magical prosthetics, as well as a magical prosthetic wand. Prosthetic wand. It's just a wand, but it has a battery of his own blood in it, because his own blood, you know, blood regenerates. So that's quite a cool idea. He doesn't have access to his innate magic anymore, but because his blood is magic and will slowly go on, he's able to start draining bits of his blood to create a battery into a wand that he's then able to focus the magic through. I thought that was neat. I mean, again, I think there's a lot of ideas in here that are neat and are something, but the book just absolutely feels like it's, I don't think it feels like a first draft, but it does feel like a, like, first book in a lot of ways. And a first book in a way of just kind of having a lot of these strong ideas, working on it, finding a way to improve a lot of that plot structure, getting it together, but it's still really kind of lacking a lot of things that just make it feel half-baked in so many areas that for me just aren't making up for the areas that are enjoyable. And I found that the things that I liked in the earlier parts, I like less because, again, Marullo and Cameron's dynamic is just kind of treading water. There's kind of a misunderstanding where maybe Marullo thinks that Cameron hates him, but also, you know, he's still overall pretty affectionate-ish to him. Like, it's just kind of not anything. It's not committing to hard directions, choices. When we get down to the climax has no suspense to it. It's very fast and... Okay. So, Glenda and Domitia are traveling together, looking for Cameron. They go eventually to Cameron's house to get like a beloved possession of his and use that to track them down. While they're doing so, Glenda is developing a kind of like the hots for Domitia, but also she does find Domitia really disgusting and hideous, but also that it's clearly a very internalized thing. Again, something that just absolutely needed to be more than what we get, where she just kind of has Domitia be like a bit confident or like talk down to her. At one point she's like, you know, I'm old enough to be your mother, and Glenda's like, feels confusingly turned on by that. Like, there's just a little bit of that going on, but not much. And eventually, when they're finally at like the beachfront and Domitia is getting ready to go and enter the dome and like confront them, because she does oppose the whole destroying the world thing. Like, this is when Glenda makes like an outward comment about Domitia being fat. So Domitia opens a portal and like shoves her through and just banishes her. And so she's just out now. She's not in the rest of the climax. She's just somewhere else. Then Domitia goes and like lifts the ocean above the dome and crashes on down through. At this point, like, Hydna and Marullo are in the final stages of their ritual work. Hydna has flown off to like build the 5 points for a giant pentagram that is part of the ritual. That one's to like break the barrier bubble that's sealing this weird planet in. And the other half is Marullo is going to like find and kill God. So Cameron runs into her while he's trying to retrieve Marullo's flesh, legs, and arms for the final part of the ritual. And Domitia is like, I don't really want to hurt you, but I will, because ultimately the danger that you're posing to tons of people, I don't think that that's good, so I feel sorry about this. You know, you don't seem like you're that bad of a person, but I think I'm gonna have to stop you. And Cameron was given Marullo's wand and is able to remember one spell, which is that spell that he did when he was a child to make some rocks lift for part of a cathedral. So he is able to use that spell and the wand to just make Domitia, like, shoot up through the ceiling again. And then he runs back to Marullo, and they make a portal and hop through. They jump portaling around for a little bit until they wind up in the desert. And here they draw out the sigil and all of these things and get ready to... First, they have to, like, view God before then they're going to kill God. So they complete that ritual, and then they both black out. And Domitia catches up to them at this point, and she is waiting for them, just kind of sitting down when they wake up. And she's like, so you've learned what I learned a long time ago, which is that God is dead. What you just saw was nothingness because you saw where God is, which is nothingness. It seems like God's final act was recreating this world into this weird fantasy-scape. Whatever God was, and no one knows, we don't know in any way, we don't learn, it was some sort of very powerful being that sensed, like, something, it got the information about this fantasy place. I'll get to exactly what happened in that regard. and it thought that that was some sort of wish or prayer or desire from the planet, and it came and it granted that wish in a way. So to Domitia, this is where she does talk about it. Let me see if I can find her. Let's see. Where is it? Okay. So, I imagine it happened on the day of descent. Domitia pushed her false eye back into its socket without any sign of discomfort, then motioned for us to sit across from her. Neither of us complied. Me, because I had to remain standing to maintain my sanity, and Marullo, I assumed, out of pride. With a sigh, she continued. It was the dying act of a being beyond our comprehension. It came to our choked, dying world and answered a prayer. At Marullo's snort, something in Domitia's posture sharpened. I don't hate God. A being of that scope, expending its life to grant our wish. I think it must have loved us. Not as individuals, but as a world. I think in its last moments it loved us enormously. And the connection people seek with it now, the desire to touch that love through prayers and artwork and music. Some of it is beautiful. Some of it moves me. And I think that's nice. Then she does continue. I cannot, however, ignore the arrogance of the act, the same arrogance that you now demonstrate yourself. She leveled her gaze at the sorcerer. A single being, no matter its power or intelligence, cannot make decisions for millions. Marullo, you must understand. You have no right to impose yourself on this world. Watch me, snarled the sorcerer. You think you deserve to choose because you can take it by force? Then take it. Outmatch me. And she then proves to be basically impossible to fight off. She is much stronger. Marullo is quite weak from all of the magic ritual stuff beyond the fact he recently amputated some limbs. And she's just way stronger. But as they are confronting each other here, this is where Marullo kind of goes, okay, the thing is, my job was to find and kill God. God's already dead. And what Domitia doesn't know is that he has a sister. And the sister is doing the other part of the plan right now. And this is where that kicks in. And so the big barrier around the earth that's keeping it sheltered is starting to collapse. And as it starts to, Domitia begins to sing. A lot of magic in this seems to involve a bit of singing and kind of very poetical mumblings and mutterings. So she starts singing intensely, and as the world kind of starts to go crazy and end, what happens is that she dies, and she doesn't, the world doesn't seem to change. And so Marullo's shit, she stopped it. They're both kind of now laying in the ground, exhausted and a bit dying. And he's everything's for nothing. It didn't work. She somehow stopped the spell. But what we find out pretty quickly is that actually she managed to preserve this world. She preserved this world, the way of things, the magic, but the bubble is still popped. And so the stars above them have changed because the modern world, which is something like the 23rd century, is now able to see Earth, or, this is not Earth, it's Larnia. And a spaceship notes the reappearance of Earth after, the incident. It's been a couple thousand years, and Earth just apparently disappeared, and no one really knew what to do about it. And now Earth is back, except Earth appears completely transformed into a weird fantasy world, which freaks everybody out. The spaceship, which is sentient, is really, really excited and interested in this. Its crew is a little bit less so because everyone is really freaked out by the idea of magic. They wind up flying down, making contact with Marullo and Cameron, and Marullo, Cameron, and Hydna get taken up into the spaceship, treated medically. Marullo gets newer prosthetics again. Magic is still working, but now they have the technology. Hydna and Marullo are both extremely into all of the technology and everything about it. Hydna is actually, she's called the brains of the operation. Cameron assumes that it's always been Marullo's idea and he's kind of pushing her to help, but she is actually just as into it. She's just been like playing it safe and not being all wild like Marullo has been on the surface. She's just been keeping to herself, but she is like a crazy mathematical genius and she loves technology and all of these things. So yeah, the end of the book is them going to the moon and not really knowing what their place in this world is. There's some like kind of mentions of what the world, like Mars is some sort of hyper-capitalist hellscape, it seems, and the moon is a lot smaller and a lot more like open with their rights and stuff. So I guess if there was to be a sequel, it would be potentially about a war or escalation between Larnia, Mars, and the moon. I don't know. But yeah, they wind up there. Marullo and Cameron are in love and happy. You know, it's fine. Oh, and we do learn that how specifically like God arriving seems to have happened is that Larnia comes from a video game that also is like a million other properties. A huge successful game that also had like a TV series and so many other tie-in products. And to commemorate like the 23rd series of the live action TV adaptation, the giant company that owns the Larnia properties launched out a bundle into space that had a bunch of like maps and books and things about the world. You know, kind of like how we've done before of like, I don't know, the Golden Record or whatever. They did this as some sort of publicity thing. And so it's believed that God encountered this and then, I guess, traced the trajectory and was like, this is clearly like something that this planet wants. And that's why it latched on to this very silly fantasy world and just was like, yeah, I'll do that. And specifically on like the box art for the game, by the way, the main villain, it looks quite a lot like Marullo. So there's kind of an interesting aspect to that, I guess, in terms of, is he also a fictional character? Is it not that it rewrote the world to be this, but it also created certain characters who were in the canon and just kind of rewrote people, or I guess a dragon, so actually a computer, to be this? Like, there's a question about how that really works, but it's not really anything. So, yeah, that's the book. Again, I don't hate it at all. I don't love it. I like some bits of it. Mostly when I consider it, I feel bad for the author that there's been any kind of drama, like alleging like anything. I think that it's just kind of, you know, a first book. I feel bad for debut authors in general, especially though when you are writing in this sphere of like Tumblr and the comedy is definitely like not everyone's mileage, but some people will really enjoy it. And that kind of view from the outside, especially relating to Tumblr, I don't know, I've been there for a long time, where it can make you so afraid as a writer. I haven't done really proper writing in God knows, but, you know, I do have, like, I wrote, like, 3 books, so I have 3 published books, and my first book was Angel Radio. That was when I was 17. I think it came out when I was 18, but, like, the publishing and most of the work on it was when I was 17, and I was, of course, already really on Tumblr. I'd been on Tumblr for a number of years, and in that one, and then, like, Good Angel, which is, like, 2 years later, I had so much anxiety and fear around the judgment and ways of writing things. I think that a lot of stuff in here, and particularly like relating to like social justice, which I feel like we never use as a term anymore, but it was back then. I feel like a lot of the issues in here around some of the representation and some of kind of the awkward inclusion of things is probably based on some of that kind of internalized fear that you're going to be told off by readers, or people are all going to come out and hate what you wrote because you unintentionally didn't mention this or did say this, but said it in a way that is just wrong, but not even like super wrong, just like it's not quite right. And just even a little thing. And I'm not saying that like this book has zero things to critique around representation or anything, but I definitely think that overall it's like clumsy or awkward more than anything else. I think that the stuff like Glenda is a bigoted character, so she has a lot of these thoughts and opinions, and that's her motivation, and it should have been fleshed out and all of that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with her, technically speaking. We have stuff like Hydna. There was controversy on like, Hydna, is she a transmisogynistic stereotype? Is she a racist stereotype? I don't think so for either of those. Like, she's not trans to our knowledge, but even then, like, she's a large, muscular woman who's like aggressive, so I know where these tropes and ideas come from, but I think it is missing a lot of that extra stuff that actually brings it to being a stereotype or an association. Her actually being a person of color, which I don't really think that she is. Like, her skin is described as tawny, which is a light brown color. I kind of thought that that was like tan, but then she does live in an underwater city, though she does go outside sometimes. So I don't know. But it doesn't read to me as that's a significant thing. What it reads to me, and here's the thing, this is very clear in this book, I think that the author just is really into like big, strong, muscular women and thinks that they're hot. Like, that is very clear. Cameron thinks that they're hot. The way that Hydna is written, she's like a big, goofy, enthusiastic, energetic, but super muscular and tall woman. And she's written to be like hot. And Domitia is fat. She does have like, also it's mentioned she has some musculature, but she's like a fat, but then she's also again like a powerful, tall, a bit intimidating, but also very nice woman. And I think that that stuff is because it's hot. That's what the author really is intending to do here. With these two characters, it's a reflection of their own taste, probably. I can't really speculate on those things. But when I see some of the talk in, like, this review around, like, the way that she's written as if she's, like, a non-sexed or, like, is in men's clothing. I don't think she's really written to be in specifically men's clothing. She's written to be in, like, a plain, normal clothing that is just kind of, like, a tunic and pants. These things like that, I can just see it as, yes, I know where that critique is coming from, and I can't say that, I'm the arbiter of all these things. I just don't think it's actually this big thing or a huge issue. I think that the way that it's written is completely fine. I think that the author thinks that very strong women are really hot. And that's kind of it. And you can definitely say that the book doesn't really have any people of color. That's true. It doesn't really have any characters, though. There are 4 characters. 5, sorry. There's 5 characters total. Most of the book we are with 2 characters. Second half of the book, kind of a bit more. But it's really sparse on all of those things. And that's another point of, like, actual critique to be said about it. But the representation, I do not see the problem with this. Okay. Do I have any other thoughts? I feel like there are, again, a lot of other things to say. Lots of little things. I keep having this after I'm done with a book when I'm talking about it like this, because I do think about it a bit ahead of time. Sometimes I've made some notes to myself, but obviously I am kind of used to that hyper writing down everything mindset, really trying to get down to it. And then here I'm like, I'm gonna forget something. But I think that is just kind of it. Like, there's a lot in this book, but also not enough. There's just a lot more that I wanted, a lot more commitment to the bit. I wanted more in terms of comedy and characters and the plot, but I didn't hate everything going on. I think that it's completely, like, for a debut author and for a kind of challenging category, again, I think humor, people think of humor as being easy, but it's actually so hard to get right that it really is a challenge to write. I think that this is a completely like decent, even pretty good. I think a lot of people will enjoy this. I think a lot of people will not enjoy this, probably based on what I've said about it. You can decide for yourself quite easily which category you fall into. It's a kind of absurd, silly, like low intensity, enemies to lovers ish, but not really. It's more kind of like, you know, silly, annoying, bratty knight trying to earnestly appeal to the very grumpy and moody and lonely sorcerer. There isn't like a huge amount of antagonism between them. If anything, I think that they're very nice to each other the whole time, even with like the bits of mild torture and like transforming. And, you know, I think that that part of it is fun and you could enjoy that. But I overall, I'm struggling to say, did I enjoy it? Did I not enjoy it? I don't know. Like, I'm done with it. It's sort of where I'm at. And I'm gonna give it 3 stars on Goodreads to be nice. I always want to be a lot nicer to more obscure authors writing LGBT stuff because, goddamn, the community tends to overjudge. But, okay, yeah. That's gonna be everything.